First, good morning, everyone. And of course, I would like to thank Ida, Massimo, and Tati Tatiana Petrati for the invitation to this very interesting conference. Yeah, it's been a while that we didn't meet, and it's always nice to meet again and to talk about things we like. Unfortunately, my speech, my communication is more a group of doubts. I have to say that we don't have, we have problems in terms of the number of storage yards in Tyre, because the material we'll be working in Albaz, the amphorae, the number of amphorae is low, and most of them, they are broken, or they didn't preserve the rims or part of them. And what we have now in the Acropolis in Tyre is still under study. And the problem of the Acropolis, the stratigraphy is extremely complicated. And yeah, it's been a challenge to do that study. So and what happens here? Okay, so I would like to start with these 5 points that are very important when we approach the amphorae of Tyre, which is supposed to be one of the main economic centers in the ancient Mediterranean. Probably it was one of them, not the most important, but anyway. So if we want to approach the amphorae in Tyre, the base is Bikai's excavations, not far from the area we are working now. She established the stratigraphy, she established the sequence, and she has also established the base for the typology. A typology that is compatible with the typology established by, for example, by Anderson in Sarepta. Actually, they come from the same team. So both typologies are compatible. Second, we have no information about the fabrics of Tyre. Obviously, people who is working in the Levant, in central Levant, is able to recognize production from Tyre, from Sidon, from Sarepta, from Beirut, from Byblos, even from Tartus, or even from the Bikai. Sometimes these differentiations that are possible to see macroscopically and by working on this material is not reflected on something more precise. There are some projects on analysis on fabrics. For example, from the area of Tyre, we have Mohamed Rumi and Ida Ollano's project. They analyze a number of samples, including some from Tyre. There were a very interesting XRF project on several sites in the Levant, directed by Professor Uwe Finkbeiner from Tübingen. We will talk about that later. And there were also some smaller projects around that they were not, they didn't arrive to any end. For example, one of the main focus now in Tyre in the project is to achieve the definition of the local fabrics from Tyre, establishing what is the evolution from the early Bronze Age down to the classical times. We have all these levels, we have all this material, and we will have the possibility of see the evolution of the fabrics in Tyre, and for once to define what is Tyre pottery. Obviously, since we only can talk about fabrics from microscopical identification, the typology of the Tyrian amphorae is based on the assumptions of what is local fabrics from Tyre. But we cannot forget that the commercial traffic with amphorae can somehow blur the image, and the presence of of amphorae from other places can, make it more difficult, the identification or the real scope of the amphorae from Tyre. And as I said before, recent excavations are under study in Tyre. So moving forward, the structure of this communication will be have three parts. I will try to make an approach on what we know about the fabrics from Tyre. Second, I will try also to make another approach on the typological distribution in the Iron Age in Tyre. And third, I would like to address a topic that I think is going to be dealt with tomorrow, which is what happens in the West, in the overseas productions, and how we can connect both streams of the sea, of the Mediterranean. So, starting off with a typical Phoenician or Tyrian local fabrics from Tyre, we have previous questions. For example, the number of workshops. We don't know how many workshops were active at the same time or over the time. We don't know the titularity of these workshops, if they were private, if they were depending on institutions or landlords. What was the target of the production? They were specialized, they were producing everything. Obviously, it all depended on the demand for this amphorae. What was the scale and intensity of the production? But I mean, from many or some of the technical features that you can see in the amphorae, obviously, it was a specialized production, and it was a big scale for the time, for the standards, from the Iron Age standards, I mean. So we have to consider that there may be different fabric recipes, depending on workshops, local workshops, I mean, from Tyre, depending on forms and types, and also from qualities of the productions. And third is very important, is the evolution of the production chain. What can I say, for example, is that there are some changes in the fabrics, the local fabrics. From early Middle Bronze Age, Middle Iron Age, to the late Iron Age. It was possible to observe that, for example, not in storage yards, but in other forms like jugs or plates, even in big containers like amphorae craters or on cauldrons, in Albaz at least. So starting off with the workshops, I think that we have evidence to say that there were more than one workshop working at the same time in Tyre. The evidence comes from Albaz. Albaz, we have a lot of tombs with the funerary gifts, and among them we have the containers. And the containers sometimes are identical in the same tomb. That indicates that the both jars they come from the same batch, probably. One example, very nice example, is these four. They come one from the same tomb, these two from other tombs, contemporary tombs. So I can say that if they are not from the same batch, they come from the same workshop. But at the same time, in what we consider local fabrics, we have different. We have the same forms, the amphorae crater, made in a different way. So we can assume that there are another workshop working at the same time and producing amphorae crater in Tyre. So, and something similar happens, for example, with the amphorae, or even something very interesting, that is, this is from the same tomb. We have the same shape, the body and the neck, even the rim, more or less, but with a different location of the handles, we have two different forms. But the basic of the form, morphological basics of these two urns is the same. So we can consider that we need still to go deeper in analysis, in fabric analysis, but we can say that we have evidence, or at least we can hypothesize that we have different workshops working at the same time in Tyre. This is what the fabrics from Tyre look like. They are very characteristic. They have this dusty touch with this grayish look like limestone inclusions, the red oxide inclusions, foraminifera, almost no quartz. I mean, the quartz is very, very little and small, and is very characteristic, this kind of fabric. I mean, you can have different qualities depending on the porosity, the number of inclusions, the size of those inclusions, but the basic is that. And you have here these two examples that are two plates, and here we have a jar. So as you can see, is very evident, and that is the typical fabrics we have in Tyre. And we have that typical from the Middle Iron Age, I mean the 9th century onwards. Even you can recognize this kind of fabrics in the classical times, in Hellenistic and Roman times. These are a first attempt to analyze several samples from Tyre made by Eva Miguel, La Fuente, and Perez some time ago. And you can see that correspond to an amphorae that correspond to a plate, a commonware plate. And you can see how more or less the features are the same. I'm sorry about the quality of the photograph, is what I have right now here, but you can see the foraminifera, you can see the inclusions. So it's more or less what it looks like I hope in future, with future research, we will be able to offer you a better image of what the fabrics are. Also, Eva Miguel and Bucheda, they published some time ago an analysis, an article on a number of around 150 or 200 samples from Albaz, and they were able to recognize a very consistent group from chemical analysis, a very consistent group, and in this sample, I was active also in this sampling, and we also included some things that were odd, that were different, and they were really, really clear in the results. They also recognized 3 subgroups inside this big grouping here that also is that were very, very consistent. So we can say that we have a typical fabric from Tyre that also chemically speaking is very consistent. So we have the evidence that this could be the Tyre production. So, but we come to the project I mentioned before from Professor Uwe Finkbeiner from Tübingen. It involved several sites in the central Levant, was Tyre, Tel Burak, Sarepta, Beirut, and Halde. There were samples from different forms, all from the late Iron Age, and the analyses were XRF. The results, I'm not going to go into those results because they are not published yet. I asked permission to Professor Finkbeiner, and he granted me that to talk here now about that. But the analysis led to 8 groups of fabrics that were present in all these sites. From the distribution of these groups, the different sites, we can make a very interesting differentiation between 2 areas in the Levant. In the central Levant, we have Tel Burak, Tyre, and Sarepta on the one hand, Halde and Beirut on the other. So, and it's something that, for example, from microscopically speaking, you can see the difference between the fabric from north from Saida to south from Saida. There are 2 different groups, and they're easy to differentiate, let's say, microscopically. So here, focusing on the groups of the Tyre, Sarepta, and Tel Burak, this distribution of these fabrics, you can see that Tyre, which is in blue, are more common. Number 7, number 6, and number 5 of these groups. I will show you later what it means. But it's also very interesting to see how number 7 is very, very consistent, very abundant in Tyre, but is the second type, for example, in Sarepta or on Burak. So it makes this kind of differentiation. And I think this fabric, this group number 7 is the Tyre fabric. Why? Because what I'm going to talk now. This is the group distribution in Tyre. As you can see, this number 7 is included everywhere in big numbers. For example, in commonware plates, in cups, defined ware cups, in jugs, in storage jars, and in other containers. So number 7 is this group 7 is very, very, very abundant. It's the more abundant one. Compared, for example, with number 6, group 6, or group 5. And also very interesting to see how the distribution of the different groups in different forms, which is also interesting, and recalls what I said before about the possibility of different recipes for different forms. This is number 7, group number 7, and this is how it looks like. As what I mentioned before, this very, very, pale brown, dusty touch of the fabrics. And this here, you can see the distribution, the proportion among the entire number of samples. What is the distribution in Tyre? The percentage in Tyre. What is the percentage of the different forms in the different? I mean, in the entire assemblage. And again, we can see how important are storage jars, the plates, and except for the lamps and the mortars, they are very, very, very well represented everywhere. From the amphora point of view, it's very interesting that there are these rims come from Beirut. This is represented from Beirut because from Tyre we only offered shards, no forms. So it's very interesting to see how there's a big representation of this kind of rims, which is Tyre and Bikai's type number 9, for example. We'll go to that later, and less represented in other forms. For example, this is a late Bronze Age jar that could be a decorated storage jar from the late Iron Age as well. They are typical, these long necks with a thickening inside. And for this one, I don't have much progress. I saw things, for example, in Hurbarot Sayid in northern Palestine, but it seems to be something odd. So this one, this rim here, I'm not very clear what it can be. We saw that, for example, in Tel Burak before in the presentation, which is an entire is is not very common as a type. Group 6 again is represented mostly entire by amphorae, but also by jugs, bowls, and jars, or the containers. And it's very interesting to see how this abundance here for storage jars. And this is how it looks like. And it's true. I mean, in Tyre, when you work, I mean, from microscopically speaking, the fabrics, the typical fabrics is what I mentioned before, but there's a second group, this is very also frequent, which is characterized by these very tiny, small white inclusions. The fabric is almost the same, but with these white inclusions. And it's very interesting to see how this XRF analysis gave the same results. I mean, what we have observed in Tyre. Also, it's interesting to see how the typological distribution of this group is different. The representation in this type 9 from Bikai is lower, but it's better characterized in this group here, characterized both by this square thickenings on the outside. I mean, this is a late example of it, but for the rest in the late Iron Age is clear, and this is a variation of the same group here, and also one only with a type with a ridge. So we see from the amphorae we have on the one hand we have group 7 with this type with the simple rims. This one number 6 with these thickenings on the square thickenings in the outside. And number 5, this is the group number 5, which is represented only by one example of amphorae, at least in Beirut. And again, it's very interesting to see how it's more represented in plates or jars and bowls, and less in storage jars, almost nothing. And it's true, in Beirut, for example, there's only one example of it, one rim. And it's also a very different, form compared with the rest, with what we saw before. So going now to the typological distribution during the Iron Age in Tyre, we have also some questions to answer. For example, well, from the sample we have in Tyre, what is local, what is imported? So all these talking about regional, I mean, regional, interregional, Levantine productions. Can we talk about sharing morphological features, sharing clays, or I mean the same sort of this? What was the name of these clays in north from Nakura Cape? Forgot. Sorry. It will come later. So it's supposed to be the clays from the area that should characterize all the productions in central Levant, or at least from Tyre to Saida. We also have to consider something important, which is the evolution, the production and the distribution. So we have to talk about local, regional, and interregional productions. We have to talk about the technical, the fabrics, the surface finishes, morphological changes, and also very important, if you want to understand the evolution of the pottery not only in the Iron Age, also in the late Bronze Age and later on, this pottery has several features that are common, which is standardized. So you have forms that are well defined. They are very functional. They are conservative. I mean, they always preserve the essence of these forms, even though they are dynamic. I mean, the components of the forms change, but preserving the essence. This evolution is linear. There's no breaks. There's no jumps. It's very, very linear, and it's accumulative. I mean, one transformation gives place to the next, and you can follow very well the line. This is the distribution of the types in Tyre in Bikai's excavation. It's important to say that the stratigraphy, even though it covers most of the Iron Age, there are spaces in the sequence that are not represented here. We will go to that later. But important to see is that we have a very important presence of these types 9, that that's the one we saw before, which is the one that is dominating all over the Iron Age from the beginning, from the transition from the late Bronze Age in the late 12th, early 11th century BC, down to the, let's say, 8th century, when they were substituted by these forms. Probably these forms that were more, they fit better for seaborne transport. For example, this is the type that they were found in the shipwrecks of Tanit and Nastarte in the coast of Ashkelon, for example. And we can also see how here these very late forms take over at the end. And it's interesting to see also that this form here, which is type 2 in Bikai's typology, is a continuation, as we will see also later, from what we have before in the 8th. So interesting to see how this baggy, I mean, we can see how it evolved from the triangular shapes with the carinated shoulders to a more baggy shapes during the Middle Iron Age, to the pretty baggy later on during the 8th century, the late Iron Age, and how they decline, and these new forms take over. But it's important to see that this form didn't disappear; they continue. Why? Here is previous communications showed this evolution. These are jars from Tyre, and this is the evolution from the early Bronze Age to the Roman period, from the 3rd century AD here. And you can see how this evolution didn't stop in present times. The shape that started in the early Bronze Age continued slowly, gradually evolving into what we call the Roman period amphorae from Tyre. And I have to thank Dr. Ulla Wistenczak for filling the classical part of this scheme. All these are from Tyre. This is from Albaz, for example, from a context from probably the 7th century. This is not. This is from Beatles, but it was identified as the fabric from Central Levant, from the southern part of the Central Levant, and the rest are from Tyre, on the areas from Tyre, let's say, or coming from Tyre. So it's very interesting to see how the gradual evolution of these forms and how they don't look like each other at all from the beginning to the end, but going step by step, they made sense. This makes sense also here as you can see in this graphic, where the type 9 continued from 11th, which is the typical in the late Bronze Age. These are the context from the late Bronze Age here. This is the transitional period, strata 14. So you can see clearly how type 9 in Tyre took over with a peak in the Middle Iron Age, 9th century. The decrease during the 8th century. This is the moment where the sausage or the torpedo yards took over. And you can see how at the end, in the stratum number 1, this form took over, marking a very interesting evolution, how different types evolved and how these types overlapped to each other, making a logical evolutionary line. But it's also interesting to see how the same trace we can see in Sarepta. This is a chronological table just to show what is the chronology of on the sequential on all the parts that were not represented in the stratigraphy in Tyre. This evolution can be also observed in the fabrics themselves. This is an early Bronze Age amphorae from Tyre, from the Acropolis. This is an Iron Age fabric. You can see how the inclusions are almost the same.
Paco, excuse me.
Yeah, sure.
Just inform you a couple of minutes.
Okay. Yeah,
3
sure.
4 minutes.
Yeah,
just to inform.
Yeah, thank you very much. Hellenistic times and Roman times. So going to the overseas, we have several points to address, which is we cannot confuse in overseas and in the settlements, outposts, trade with overseas production. We have to take care about the purpose of that production. Also, it's very important once the workshops were established from where the potters came from, and if they came only from the Levant, we have to also take care about the sequential stage of those foundations, because that is going to be the base on which this production will evolve. And I have to say that for what I see, the production of pottery in the Mediterranean, at least the Phoenician pottery production of the pottery in the Mediterranean, is autonomous. I mean, I don't see so much contact between East and West. So once the workshops were established in the Central Levant, in the West Levant, in the Western Mediterranean and the Central Mediterranean, the evolution of their production is autonomous. They made their own evolutionary lanes and with their own characteristics, as I said before. And also, it's very important to take care about the second generation workshops. I mean, foundations made by people that already had founded a workshop in the West. So one of the best examples is to compare the typical amphorae from the Círculo del Estrecho, let's say, which is this baggy, with the amphorae from Tyre, from the Levant, in this case from Tyre, I don't say that Tyre amphorae were the prototypes of those ones, because I think that there were more areas involved in the expansion. But it's interesting to see that the productions in the West didn't adopt the torpedo amphorae. They adopted the baggy-shaped amphorae. Baggy-shaped amphorae that, as I said before, they started the decline at the late 9th during all the 8th century BC, which is also very interesting to see. This is again the comparison. This is the time when, for example, the prototypes for the plates, we are going to another form, for the plates in the West started, which is this form here. So in my opinion, my hypothesis will be that the first workshops in the West started somewhere here. So at the end of the Middle Iron Age in the Levant, which is, let's say, the second half and advanced moment of the 9th century of the 9th century BC. Okay, so I think I went too much, I took too much. So I'm going to sum up. So again, we are trying to identify, to define the fabrics from Tyre. We have hints that can help us to identify, or to at least to put at the right approach to those local fabrics. We can see how the evolution of the fabrics are also connected with the evolution of the amphorae, an amphorae which has an evolution which is very logical. And this logical also can be transported to the West, to the prototypes used for the Western, far Western, because the Central Mediterranean is another story about the amphorae. The Western Mediterranean, how these prototypes from the East go to the West, and when exactly could be the moment when they were adopted. Because it's very, I mean, the only torpedo yards we have in the West come from trade. They are not produced there. And I think I talked too much. So thank you very much. I'm sorry for talking too much. Thank you.